Welcome to Into Theology, a new podcast by the Gospel Coalition Canada. I'm Wyatt Graham, and I'm joined with Ian Clary. The podcast Into Theology is meant to get people reading great works of theology together to know and to enjoy God and His creation. So this is a bit of a teaser, so I thought we'd introduce ourselves, tell you about our first book we're going to study together, and then talk about who should join. And the hint will be that it's everyone. So yes. We'll start with you, Ian. Who are you, Ian Clary? Why are you doing this podcast with me?
Well, I guess to answer your second question first, I'm doing this podcast with you just because I think it's such a good idea. It's great to get Christians reading and to read good books. And if I can encourage that, especially with Canadian evangelical Christians, I'm more than happy to be a part of this sort of endeavor. I'm Ian. I am actually Canadian, so it's kind of appropriate, I guess, to be part of TGC Canada in this. But I am one of those kind of, I guess you could say to a degree, a traitor in that now I'm teaching just outside of Denver at Colorado Christian University. So just finished my third year teaching here at CCU and teach mainly historical theology. I'm responsible for kind of like the high Middle Ages to the 20th century for the majors that we have for theology majors. But I teach everything, man, like philosophy, intro to theology, New Testament, and world religions. It's just a bit of a crazy show. But before we moved here, my family and I, we lived in Toronto for about 15 years. I worked with Justin Galati at West Toronto Baptist Church, taught a little bit on the side at places like Redeemer University, just outside of Hamilton, Heritage College. I did a lot of my training at Toronto Baptist Seminary and did my PhD at the Jonathan Edwards Center at the University of the Free State, where I actually wrote on a Canadian, Arnold Dallimore, and I sort of surveyed his various biographies, especially his famous Whitfield two-volume biographies, and looked at his approach to doing the past. So I'm actually really thankful that the PhD will hopefully get published by the end of the summer. So it'll be kind of expensive, but hopefully all our listeners will just be so enticed by everything that we have to say that they'll go buy it in massive numbers. What about you?
Okay. Everybody loves buying an $80 theology book, so we'll hope they do that. Sometimes it is worth it, though, I should say. What about me? So I am Canadian too, but I still live in Canada. I was a trader for a while in that I lived in the U.S. I married an American, but I made my way back up here in 2016. I did my PhD at Southern Seminary, education at other places in the U.S., Master Seminary, Liberty University. I'm from Western Canada. I'm married with a couple kids.
You're a Hurden Albertan.
I'm a Hurden Albertan, yeah. And go to a church in Hamilton, Ontario, where I've been for, I guess, 3 or 4 years now, 3.5 years. And
you're at West Highland?
Yeah, West Highland Baptist Church.
It's a great church.
Yeah, we enjoy it there. And actually, one of my someone who oversaw my dissertation, Michael Haken, is at my church. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, he oversaw mine too. He was my, I had 2 co-promoters, Dr. Haken and then a guy named Adrian Neely, who's now at Puritan Reform.
Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, he's one of my, I guess, readers, internal readers, or whatever the right terminology is.
Yeah.
I should remember these things, but I can't. So I'm the executive director of the Gospel Coalition Canada. I teach at Ryle Seminary, which is in Ottawa and Burlington. I guess that's basically me, family church background. So I'm also very interested in theology. I am excited to talk to you about theology. And I think we should probably talk about the first work that we're going to look at. And maybe we can even talk about why it's a good book to choose. And that's John Calvin's The Institutes of Christian Religion. So I guess technically I put it forward as the choice. I think it's a good choice. It's a safe choice. It's one that anyone in the Protestant kind of faith looks back to and realizes is a great work of theology. That's part of it. It's also had a profound influence on the church for nearly 500 years. And I think it's very accessible too. It's written in a very straightforward manner. Yeah. Calvin, I think, was trained as a lawyer. Maybe that would help his clarity. I'm not sure if that's the reason. But it has a bit of, I think he calls it lucid brevity in one of his commentaries. And he does have that. So it's a work of theology that's old, but readable. There is some old language in there, but it is accessible to most people. And we're hoping to make it even more accessible by doing a weekly this podcast, where we kind of summarize things that Calvin said, maybe clarify anything that's obscure and talk about some of the major points. So do you have any thoughts on why this is a good book to start with?
Oh, for sure. I mean, in my historical theology class that I teach every spring here, I get students in that are not, what we would call Calvinistic or Reformed, who have certain hesitations about having to read, because I do primary texts and we just kind of work our way through them. And so we spent a few weeks with Calvin, and there, a little bit of what's this going to be like, as we're going to, deal with this horrible guy that invented the doctrine of predestination or something. And we look at the twofold, the kind of the idea of the knowledge of God that starts out the Institute. And then I look at his predestinarianism, and then we round it out by looking at his doctrine of the church and the sacraments. And they come away from it, whether they come away convinced of Calvinism or not, they definitely come away with a big appreciation for him. Because once you kind of like dive into Calvin, you realize that, even as you're saying, like 500 years later, we're still reading him. There's a lot of his contemporaries that, in many respects were real leaders of the Reformation. We don't read as much, but Calvin has a timeless quality. And whether you're going to agree with him on everything, you will appreciate him. And he doesn't just write for the head, but he writes for the heart. And I think that's really where he can draw readers in. So I just hope that, whoever joins us with this podcast, whatever your theological perspective, I hope that you'll come with an open mind and just be ready to have both head and heart filled. And I think you'll really appreciate that you did.
Yeah, I think that's an important point you made, that like this is not a book on Calvinism.
Yeah.
It's not. There are some aspects of what became Calvinism in it, I'm sure, but that's not it. It's about worshiping God. It's about learning how to live the Christian life. It's learning who Christ is, who God is, who the church is, how to celebrate God in the church. There's so much to it that I think sometimes he gets kind of pigeonholed into this narrow understanding of his understanding of predestination, which is in the book, but is not really the central thing. It's part of it.
Yeah. He never saw it as a driving factor, so we shouldn't either.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So who should join this podcast? Ian, who should join?
I would love to see everybody join. As I said, this doesn't have to have some sort of like narrow theological or denominational distinctive behind it. Calvin's writing for everybody. And so with that said, like if this is something that piques your interest, you've always kind of wanted to find out who this guy is, if you really want to have your mind and your soul filled, then I think jump on in. And at any point, you might watch this first video because it's short, and then you look at the next one, you're like, oh, half an hour, I don't want to deal with that. But you might want to jump in like a month or two from now because, it really is nagging at you to really want to get into this guy. Join us. I think it'd be great.
Yeah, that's it. So it's for everyone. It's over 43 weeks, and you can jump in at any time. Like there's so many different topics. It's not the case that if you miss the first week, you're done. No, join in at 20, 30, 40 weeks if you need to. And plus, all the podcasts will be online. You can always go back in time if you're curious about a topic. We'll do a little bit of a running commentary, a little bit of just talking through the spirituality of the work and what that looks like. But we're really hoping just that anyone who's interested will jump on. There's a couple versions that you can read of John Calvin's Institutes. One's very affordable, one's less affordable, but maybe a bit better. But you can read any version that you can find. It's meant to be accessible. There's even one version that you can find free online because I think it's out of copyright. So there's no really big obstacles to joining. And in a couple weeks, this podcast will be on iTunes, Spotify, all the normal stuff. So you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find it on our website, ca.thegospelcoalition.org. And just follow our social media and you'll see it announced probably every Friday or every Saturday or so when the podcast comes out. So we're looking forward to it.
There's a reading list that's like an itinerary.
That's right. Yeah, we'll release on the website a reading plan. We'll have articles. It'll be on social media. I think every Monday we'll put out that week's reading plan so you can see it on Monday night. So we'll do everything we can to make it easy to keep up or join in whenever you can. So I'm excited. Yeah, you have no excuse, exactly. All right, join us, read Calvin, get into theology, know God in his creation, and enjoy him forever. That's what we want you to do, and that's why we're doing this theology podcast.
Awesome.